we just did this, I would call it kind of a partnership collaboration, but also activation we did in Little Tokyo for Silent Hill F recently, where it's like kind of like a month-long takeover. And it's the first time this neighborhood has ever done anything like this before, where we're like, hanging decorations from some of their historic monuments. And what was really cool about that is that it really felt like a natural integration with the brand and the community.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Leaderboard Insights podcast by Overwolf. I'm your host, Nathan Lindberg, head of U.S. brand partnerships here at Overwolf. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by a leader in the world of gaming and advertising, Nikki DePaola, VP of Global Media at Liquid Advertising. Nikki oversees media strategy, planning, and buying across North America, Latin America, Europe, as well as an added focus Asia Pacific. She and the team at Liquid work with some of the biggest names in gaming, shaping how publishers connect with players to navigate the evolving landscape of media and data in our industry. Nikki, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get started with the history. Liquid Advertising, not a new player in the space. You've all been around for quite some time, doing some great things. But for those that might be unfamiliar with Liquid Advertising, tell us a little bit about the history.
Yeah, sure. So we actually got our start in gaming about 20 years ago when we started working on a few big players back in the day. And then I would say we got our big break with working with Blizzard. Worked on that account for over a decade, I think. And at the time, this was like the golden age of MMOs, and Blizzard was king at the time. You're laughing because you know what it was like.
I do.
And then from there, we quickly grew our business beyond just, PC, user acquisition type things. We expanded our focuses to mobile, console, started working with, other major players like Square Enix, Sega, Bethesda, and now here we are today. I would say, going back in time, it's really fascinating to see how the gaming landscape has changed and evolved. And now we're kind of entering a cross-platform era, gaming as pop culture era. So we really have seen it all.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who, got to work with Nikki in her first stint at Liquid, her earliest stint as an assistant media planner, I have the history and experience of seeing kind of the agency grow. And at the time, I was selling print magazines at GamePro. So yeah, I've seen the media, I've seen the transmedia world shift from print to digital to games, apps, in-game experiences, everything like that. Over the last couple of years, tell us about some of the real big successes that Liquid have had, some of your favorite campaigns that you've been working on over the last few years.
Yeah, like I said, the landscape has changed so much. So that really reflects in the types of campaigns that we're doing. What used to be maybe just buying, homepage takeovers on sites. And that was like the big thing, right? It was like, oh, we're on the front page of every major gaming site. And that was like considered a huge campaign. And then, a few out of home and maybe TV thrown in there. Those were like the AAA campaigns of, a decade ago. And these days, I would say it's a lot more pieces to it. It's activations, events. Obviously, we have influencers, since Twitch and YouTube really took off as these sorts of gaming platforms. So really 360 now. Partnerships and collaborations are really big right now. So for instance, we just did this, I would call it kind of a partnership collaboration, but also activation we did in Little Tokyo for Silent Hill F recently, where it's like kind of like a month-long takeover. And it's the first time this neighborhood has ever done anything like this before, where we're like, hanging decorations from some of their historic monuments. And what was really cool about that is that it really felt like a natural integration with the brand and the community. And it kind of serves both because, this community is an endangered historic community in LA, but, something as also, historic and this legacy of Silent Hill, that IP, bringing that to the community and helping revitalize it in a way, has gone over really well with both the local neighborhood as well as with the game and the fans who are just so excited to see this game kind of like come to life in a way. So that's like on the other extreme, right? Like going from homepage takeovers to neighborhood takeovers, I think has been, one of those cool shifts that we've been seeing. People, coming to expect and want tangible experiences.
Does the amount of opportunity, is it daunting from that perspective? Because to your point, it used to be a very simple formula of it's gaming, it's niche, take over the endemics, have high share of voice, be there the day the box, right? Back in the day, the box ships.
Mhm.
Now, I mean, gaming is so ubiquitous. You're seeing TV shows, you're seeing content series, you're seeing movies and theatrical. Like, does it make it more difficult to market a game now than it used to be, or does it more freedom and more creativity that's exciting to actually launch a game?
I I think both. So it's like because it's so much harder now, because it's so much more difficult to stand out. There's so many more games being released every year. People are playing fewer of them. You really have to you do need to apply some creative thinking and figure out like how do we make this game stand out, stand on its own, pull people away from the games that they're playing on the daily, to try something new or pay to try something new because a lot of these games, that are out there that are dominating people's times are free to plays. And so, getting them to shell out like $80 for a new game, that can be a real challenge. So it's a mix of both. You want to have more creativity because it's just so much harder now.
So it's interesting, Nikki, you mentioned some specific, really cool, unique activations that you've talked about and kind of been pursuing and testing and stuff like that. What are some examples of these programs and opportunities, and like what campaigns and what was the objective and what was the result?
Yeah, sure. So recently we ran the campaign for Void Interactive's Ready or Not, which is like this super realistic, like SWAT shooter game. And I think a challenge with that was, well, it was already out on PC, and then we were just kind of bringing it to the wider audience on console. So, it's not like, oh, surprise, cool new game that like you've never heard of. But how do we grow it even bigger? Being released on new consoles. So we wanted to expand the reach, find more channel opportunities, and rather just, like Facebook ads and things like that, where, yeah, people probably had seen them on Facebook before and think like, okay, why am I seeing this again? So yeah, new channels was a big priority for us on this one. This campaign, actually, we did test out things like AI character and chatbots, which was really successful. There are some platforms out there like Rumble that like no gaming advertiser is advertising on, where you can really stand out and reach an audience that is definitely down to play the game. So yeah, I think being a little fearless with this one, I think this is a great example of a client who is like really open to opportunities. Yeah, they had guardrails, of course, just like any brand, but being able to look at a channel and be reasonable about it and say like, you know what? You're right. Our audience probably is here, and this is worth a shot. And yeah, definitely saw really great successes. It's actually one of our great case studies for adoption for AI character and chatbots, because if you think about it, sometimes these AI chats can be similar or compared to something like Google search. If you read the marketing news lately, you see that Google search is like kind of in a weird zone right now because of like AI search results or people just asking AI instead of Google. And in direct comparisons with Google search, the AI chats and ads in AI chats perform a lot better. And I think that says a lot about, the impact of, native advertising, for one, but also advertising in a platform that just isn't really seeing much competition right now. So yeah.
So to steal a phrase from the kids, I want to double click in on that. Like when you're having that conversation and you're trying to line up a client to do something that is new, different, as everyone's favorite phrase, never been done before.
Oh yeah.
How do you start that conversation? Is it data heavy? Is it vibes heavy? Like how are you able to convince these clients to do that? What are the things that they need to hear and understand?
Vibes is actually definitely a part of it, right? Like a client, you can suss it out from a client basically if they're interested in something, in testing something, or if their objective is really like, listen, we just got to show the boss these KPIs, like, and then you can tell like, okay, like maybe risk taking is not for them. But yeah, so vibes actually plays a part. But I would say we try to do our due diligence. We don't just randomly present opportunities. Just like out of the blue or something that we feel like, oh yeah, this will probably be a good idea. Like we thoroughly vet opportunities, we try to look for case studies if they exist. And if they're, not in gaming, at least in entertainment or something, we want to understand what's trackable, what's not trackable, what should the KPIs be. Let's say something is not trackable, doesn't accept, click trackers, impression trackers, things like that. Well, then what should we focus on? What is the point of this? What is the role of this media in our overall mix? And I think coming at it from that angle, and then of course, any audience stats, usage, et cetera, is always, of course, important as well. But I think it's how that partner plays a role in the broader objective is probably one of the the foundational points.
And lastly, on that topic, like as a partner, how do we help you? Like if I'm someone that you're reaching out to saying, hey, I'd love to test your platform, I have ideas. Like typically the response is going to be, oh my gosh, do all these things today. It's like, what are the things that your team ultimately needs to be able to say, hey, this is right for this, and I need those data points, or I need those case studies. What are the things that your team needs to hear from partners to then be able to then turn around and make those recommendations confidently?
Yeah, that's another thing that depends on the client. Some clients just want case studies. They only want past examples. So if that's the case, we'll definitely let you know. But I would say most other clients, they really just want to understand the rationale. And if they don't understand the platform, so let's just chat about Overwolf briefly. If we know a client has no idea what Overwolf is, we want to make sure we do our due diligence to explain it and explain the basics. What is it? How are people using it? How much time are they spending on there? How influential is it? What are the ad opportunities? So we do want to go down a 101 path. It's really up. Hopefully we have, I think our planners at Liquid are quite good, and they're asking the right questions, reading their clients correctly, and then bringing only the relevant questions to you guys. So you don't have to pull everything from your database of stuff to justify.
Yeah, for sure. And when it comes to you've talked a lot about the things that have changed over the last 5 years in gaming and media. What are the consistencies? What are the things that you've seen that are still tried and true, that are still like, hey, there are certain things that just don't change in this industry?
Well, I think one really important one is just marketing fundamentals. I think at the end of the day, human beings are human beings. We're not, drastically changing human psychology or the way that we're necessarily interpreting information. Maybe we're getting a little desensitized to advertising and things like that. But, the fundamentals are still there where, gamers still trust the opinions of other gamers, or they trust, specific sources, whether it's an influencer or whether it's, a trusted, reviewer or something like this. So those types of marketing fundamentals of, how do you, reach somebody? How do you, you're following consumer behavior? Where are they spending their time? How do you reach them? How do you stand out? How do you influence them? I think those are more or less the same with some variation, because consumers are spending more time on social media than they were, 15, 20 years ago, things like that. But so I think we're still applying the basics, but they just, the results just going to look a little different.
Yeah, you talked a lot about influencers and creators, and obviously over the last 10 years, we've seen the rise of YouTube and Twitch and all these platforms where live content is showing. A lot of folks point that out and say that is the all, right? And you're seeing game publishers investing in influencer exclusive strategies and stuff like that. As you're trying to balance these media mixes, like how do you think about how creators add value and how, standard or experiential media adds value to a media mix?
They're all valuable at the end of the day. If you have a campaign that uses no creators, that doesn't mean that your game is going to fail. If you have a campaign that uses exclusively creators, that doesn't mean your game is necessarily going to fail. But I think it's about finding the right mix that makes sense for the message and the themes that you're trying to convey in the marketing and what you're trying to get across about the title. If it's, a single player game that, isn't too exciting to watch on a stream, yeah, maybe don't invest all of that money into influencers. Maybe there's another way to use influencers. Maybe you can use influencers that talk, more about the story, or some different aspect of the game that folks are going to find interesting. But maybe it's not like live stream play, for instance. So that's another thing that really hasn't changed about gaming, is that every game is different, and you want to be able to come up with strategies that feel tailored to the product, and not just a one size fits all approach.
Speaking of that, obviously, one of the things we talked about a little bit, you mentioned it earlier, the latest Newzoo Global Games Market Report for 2025 listed that there's essentially 66 games that make up over 80% of time played. While there are 19,000 games that came out on Steam last year, 15,000 of them had zero playtime. As you look at and try to figure out how you get partners into that elusive 66 club, what are the things that are working for you? What are the things that you're finding valuable in terms of being able to get clients through the hump of not only buying the game, but staying with the game?
Yeah, that's a really, excellent question. And it's something that, we're not afraid to address. We don't try to obscure these facts from the client. We actually want to show them, listen, it's going to take a lot more than just Facebook ads, to sell this game. I think it definitely influences the strategy in regards to how to stand out, how to differentiate, because it's so easy to make games now. Well, easy to make games now, as we're seeing by the pure volume. You really can't stick to AI generated creatives and a strategy that just says, hey, put this out there and see what works. You do have to be a little bit more thoughtful in figuring out what makes your game a little more special, a little more unique, and how do we lean into that. Obviously I'm not saying we're never going to run Facebook ads, but that needs to be one piece of the puzzle. So creatively, I think there's a lot that can go into the thinking here. And then secondly, I think channel testing is really important in this day and age. It's another way to stand out. It's another way to be in an uncluttered environment. There's a lot of new and emerging platforms out there that I think people need to, maybe only a couple advertisers are on right now. If you're there, then you are taking up a little bit more share of voice. And diversifying your media mix is kind of even more important than ever. Yes, there's going to be some standards that we'd probably always recommend, whether it's YouTube, social, etc. But what about some new and emerging channels that don't have as many gaming advertisers on them? And yeah, maybe it's a smaller audience, but test it and see how it works, and see if you can scale that. And if, we tested a lot of new channels this year that surprisingly have shown us really great results.
Do you feel like you need that buy-in from clients? Like you need them to allow you to make these, to take some of these risks, not to take the whole campaign and go one way, but to have a client that's bought in to say, hey, I'm willing to take a little bit of a risk on these things and test some new channels?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a mixed reaction. I think there's some marketers who are excited to, and it also depends on the brand. We acknowledge that, some brands, maybe there's a little bit of skepticism on, is this channel right for us? Take the example of running in AI chatbots and AI character bots. Yeah, some companies and some brands don't feel quite comfortable with that. And, we get that. But there are some brands who, kind of, it would be a perfect fit, and why not? And maybe it's not, you're not used to it. You're, a little afraid of, to let go of some creative, the creative that you're used to doing, or, some aspects there, you have to let go of some control, but it can be quite fruitful. But yeah, in short, definitely need buy-in from the clients, and just an openness. We also understand that they're in tough positions too, right? They have to report back on the success of, X, Y, and Z, and why did we spend these dollars here? I think we're also in a day and age where risk taking is definitely more rare, and clients want to feel confident in results. I think the gaming climate right now is such that, we do have to, count our pennies a little bit more and make sure that everything is effective. So there is that hesitancy on that side, but a little risk can yield decent rewards.
I think that's a great segue too to the idea of KPIs and like what are KPIs right now? Like what obviously at the end of the day, you're selling a product, sell the product, sell more of the product at the highest possible price. But how have KPIs changed? How is the way you evaluate partners changing? Like what are the things that are going on in the market now that you see in terms of what does success look like when you're testing new partners or working with existing partners?
Yeah. So, I think at this point, we don't need to talk about how CPCs and CTRs are out. Everyone knows that at this point, right? But CPIs have been around for quite a while now, CPI or CPA, cost per acquisition install. And especially with more and more mobile MMPs entering the space, like you've got AppsFlyer, Adjust, Singular, all saying that they can do PC console attribution. It's really easier than ever to integrate with a partner who can measure these things. So that's kind of like, that's just table stakes at this point, right? And if you're not doing that, there's probably some, legacy reason why or whatnot. But it's table stakes for a lot of emerging companies, especially coming out of China, where they've all they know is mobile marketing. So they're, CPA and CPA measurement is just common sense. So aside from that, something that's kind of interesting that's catching our eye is attention metrics. I think this is awesome because Overwolf is one of the few partners that we know who has kind of embraced it as well, which is really cool. But this basically, to explain it a little bit, it's more or less based on this idea that not all impressions are equal. When you think about it, it's easier sometimes to think about it from like a consumer perspective, right? Like if you think about it, if you're a consumer, which ad is more impactful? Something that you're just like scrolling by on TikTok, or you're sitting in a movie theater, the lights go down, an ad plays, right? Like, I think that's kind of the obviously that's like an extreme example. And I'm of course not saying that TikTok ads are bad or anything like that. It's an oversimplification, but there are more things to evaluate than just, let's say, a CPM or just a CPA or CPI. Because the way that CPI and CPAs are is that they will inherently favor platforms like TikTok or these performance-oriented channels that are pretty much just set to optimize towards somebody who's probably going to convert anyway. But these are all factors, right? You've got the size of the ad, sound on, if you can control frequency, if it can be targeted, just like the ad environment, if you're share a voice with other advertisers, these are all things that actually matter and have impact on things like memory encoding with customers. So evaluating everything is quite important. Adding attention metrics to, your mix when you're planning, when you're optimizing, et cetera, is really important.
Would you say that that's maybe the biggest mistake that partners are making, or are there other areas where maybe it's, again, looking at the bottom line metrics only? Like, what are the things that you're seeing that maybe you wish game publishers weren't as focused on or weren't as obsessed with, I guess?
Yeah, I think where agencies can be sometimes caught in a hard spot where like the KPI is either the lowest CPI or the CEO needs to see it or something like that. Like these two like polar opposites. And I understand. I think our marketers are also stuck in the same position where they're like, how do we satisfy both? One trend that we're seeing, and I hope this is reversing, is the separation of like brand and performance teams from each other. And I think I would call it like a mistake, but I would say it's suboptimal. Like we'll chat with brand marketers and we'll ask them like, well, what are you using for measurement? And they're like, no idea. Don't know who our MMP is. And maybe I can find out. Like maybe they can find out. And it's like that disconnect is so wild because, these metrics impact each other, right? Like if you're trying to, drive awareness for your product or, build familiarity, favorability, and things like that, that's ultimately going to be benefiting the people on the performance team. And the performance team then can just like scoop up all those TC, the, low hanging fruit, get all those low CPIs. Meanwhile, brand teams like, were we effective? I don't know. So I think that really puts them in a tough position. And, I think in the future, would love to see these teams chat a little bit more, connect the dots a bit, and see the full impact of, your 360 campaign.
Yeah, I find that I see a lot of times people say things like, it's not about necessarily brand lift, but brand trust. Because if I'm going to your point, if I'm going to trust you and I'm going to put $80 in for a new game, or I'm going to invest my time in a new activity or a new game, like I want to trust that that's going to be there. And building that trust with a consumer doesn't happen once. It happens multiple times and multiple iterations. And you really have to work through that to get someone to that point of, okay, yeah, you know what? I've seen that enough times. I believe it, to make that kind of change.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is like back to the point of like marketing fundamentals don't change. This is just right back in there, right? Like who is going to buy something that you see for the very first time as like $80? Like that's just not going to happen. That's what people think is happening when you buy like that one cool billboard or something, but that's not. You need more repetition. You need to build, the trust. The impression needs to be really positive, I think. And you have to, that doesn't happen overnight. And especially, it's not just the $80 game. It's like they're already sinking all of their time into a different game. You have to make a strong case of why they should even, give your game the time of day.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you think about all the data that's available, like sometimes you can drown in it, right? And some data can be useful and some data can just be noise. And so it's siphoning that out and really trying to understand, I think, is a huge area of opportunity. And it's one of the exciting things that we get to talk about today on this podcast. And one of many reasons why you're here, Nikki, is, Overwolf and Liquid are working together on a Liquid BI dashboard, something that, is going to give you all really interesting insights into Overwolf audiences. We have 45 million app users in our app store. It gives a lot of information on who's playing, what they're doing, what their likelihood is. Talk a little bit about how this type of data is really helpful for you all in terms of how you make not only campaign decisions, but maybe optimizations.
Yeah, I really love this idea because it's using real player data, right? Like this isn't, surveys or, things like field studies or whatever. This is actually tracking what, consumer behavior, what players are doing, what they're playing, what they're switching to, what game they're coming from. So I think this is going to be helpful in a few ways. First of all, in the planning process, I think this is going to really dispel myths about who is playing what. I think so. The first thing that a lot of our clients and marketers do, they're trying to figure out who their audience is, right? And they'll spend a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of research, trying to figure out like, okay, you play this game. Okay, therefore our audience plays this and only these other types of games, nothing else. And then you're like, okay, but I think audiences maybe are a little more nuanced than that. And I think you can tell too when you like chat with people who are like playing games. I was chatting with someone the other day and they're like, yeah, I play cozy games, but then also Baldur's Gate. And I was like, okay, see.
I was speaking with a game publisher at Gamescom, and we were talking about this dashboard and kind of what we're working on. And he said to me, he goes, Nathan, if I had access to this 2 months ago, I could have settled the debate between the marketing team and the dev team, because both teams had entirely different genres that our core audience was. And if we had only had that data ahead of time, the data doesn't lie, right? The data tells us exactly who our audience is despite our preconceived notions. And I think that oftentimes I hear from marketers, that's their biggest struggle, is that they have an opinion that maybe is more research focused, but then you have a development team that's like, no, I've been doing this. I know it's this type of audience. And it's, maybe it isn't.
Yeah, and it's like I don't even know how to quantify things like game vibes. It's like, how do you because that sometimes it's like, yeah, well, the vibe of this game is like I gotta do this and this and this, and you're like, okay, all right, I don't know.
How do you argue with someone on that? Like, how can you like, no, that's not the vibe.
Wrong vibes, yeah. So yeah, I think having the real data is like such a cool part of this. Diversity in game preferences. We're not really like. I think we're starting to see this in a few performance-oriented platforms where it's like, we're not trying to like make assumptions about who is going to like or not like this game. Let's just, follow the data, see where the leads are coming from. And, at the end of the day, sometimes with some platforms, it doesn't really make that big of a difference how like granular, like slicey dicey that you get with the targeting. We're starting to shift away from that on some platforms. Secondly, I think another thing that I'm excited about for this platform or this dashboard is like trend spotting. I really hope that we can start to see and identify trends in real time about, which games are kind of like on the decline, where are people going to, kind of using that and taking advantage of that kind of momentum that we're seeing, or like games that are gaining momentum. So I think that could be really cool. And then the measurement potential is also super interesting. Are we able to conquest, if we're conquesting certain genres and things like that, what differences are we seeing, change in user behavior, pre and post a campaign with Overwolf. That could be super interesting as well.
Yeah, how does that? Because what I've heard a lot before we sat down this year and started talking about this idea and this opportunity was I hear a lot about wishlisting and the value of wishlisting and how that's a KPI and it's the only way to really judge like if what the audience looks like. How is something like Overwolf's dashboard going to help you to decipher those types of issues and maybe change some of those client goals and expectation?
Yeah. Wishlisting, man. Wishlisting is interesting because I think it gets confused as like the end goal KPI when it's really just like, it's one way to tell if your game is has awareness or is like trendy or there's positive, favorability towards it. So if anything, I would say like, don't optimize towards that thing, because then you're just, there's going to be so many ways to exploit that, right? Just getting the cheapest wish list, and instead just observe it, see how you're doing on wish lists. We had a game come out recently where like the sales were like whatever, but then they saw the wish lists really take off, and that can tell us something about that. That can tell us that, hey, listen, people aren't ready to buy your game now, but they're interested in it. And maybe we save our budget now. Maybe the launch was like, okay, we're launched during a heavy window or something like this, but maybe there's an opportunity for a future phase, like a sale phase or something like this, where we can really take advantage of that. So instead of optimizing towards that wish list, we use it as an indicator, and it can help us with, our marketing decisions on that perspective. Yeah, sorry, I didn't really exactly answer your question because the wish list triggered me and I had to go down that rabbit hole.
That's what that was ultimately what I was asking, was more about the phenomenon of wish list.
Yeah.
So now, like, let's take the crystal ball out. Let's talk about 2026. I think that what I heard from a lot of game publishers early on this year was, well, GTA 6 is coming out, so I'm going to move out of this fiscal year and I'm going to go into 2026. Well, unfortunately, GTA 6 also moved out into 2026. Shocker. But as you're looking at trends and stuff like that for 2026, like the first question I have is, how are you advising your clients regarding launching during a window where you may have a generational title launching, and how do you balance your expectations, your results, and kind of like the marketplace in general going into this kind of 2026 year?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think with GTA, we're definitely going to see, everyone and their mom pick up that game. But there's also going to be people who don't stick with it. I think with every huge game that comes out, there's going to be people who pick it up and say, hey, it's not for me, or pick it up and, run through it. And, if everybody was a GTA super fan and they were going to play GTA forever, I think the gaming, like the top games out there right now, would look a lot different, right? Instead, it's what, like Minecraft, Roblox, Fortnite. So, but yeah, I mean, I definitely think it'll obviously do well. I wouldn't advise clients to cower in fear and, shift everything that they're doing or anything like that. I think you just have to, come with reasonable steps and guidelines of, listen, here's when we should be booking media. Here's what the share of voice is likely going to be on these types of sites. If there is opportunity for conquesting, here's what they are. Would it be a good idea to conquest, or is it not a good idea to conquest? So I think instead of panicking, it should be about, just add a touch of, reason to the mix, and, we can sort it out.
Not only that, but there obviously has been discussion of the fact that GTA 6 will launch on console first and not launch on PC for a while afterwards. So there is going to be an opening in the PC market that will be open and available. You talked a little bit about AI bots and AI characters, which I was finding fascinating.
Okay.
As you're going into 2026, like, what are the new formats? Where do you see excitement in terms of new and exciting ways for game publishers to market their games?
Yeah, this is a cool one. We're always on the lookout for new channels. I don't want to go too deep down other channels other than Overwolf on this Overwolf podcast, but yeah, AI characters, AI chatbots, the users on these platforms have really increased time spent. I read some scary statistic every day about teenagers falling in love with chatbots and things like that. So there's definitely an audience there, male and female, and there's chatbots basically for every type of person. So not just limited to teen boys or something. Um, that said, great audience to target. Communities are evolving. It's not just about Reddit and things like that, which again, still a great platform to run on. But there's also smaller communities, more kind of spread out over the internet, like small random sites that are like, oh, here's a little pocket of fandom here, and here's a little pocket of fandom there. And I'm not talking about like a forum or anything like that. I'm talking about like kind of gaming collectives. And I think that's kind of growing. I think people who want to feel engaged, create UGC, participate in kind of like quests type situations, I think. So that format, I think, is also, people want to be rewarded and look for those rewards. So I think that's also something there. And then I don't know if you've been dabbling or you've seen much from this side of things, but like web browsers, like Opera GX, Brave, like kind of alternatives to Chrome and Firefox and Safari and whatnot. I think those are kind of interesting because again, it's just attracting a somewhat niche type of consumer, right? Somebody who's concerned about their privacy, someone who's a little more tech forward. So that does tend to align with our audiences as well.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, as we wrap up, 2024, 2025 have been tough years for the gaming industry, but you get to define the gaming industry for 2026. Like, how are you feeling about the game industry? How are you feeling about video games going into 2026? Are you optimistic? Are you concerned? Like, where do you sit right now in that space?
Oh, wow. Almost a trick question. You said there was no gotcha questions, but I will say, I think I'm going to take a safe bet and say it's evolving. And that's a safe bet because we don't really know what's evolving to. I feel like, and I'm sure you've seen this too, right? Like we're in this space of gaming where it's at some weird maturity level that a lot of, the veterans, industry veterans are like starting their own thing. In marketing, they're going into consulting, or if you're a developer, you're starting your own indie studio or something. So I think we're in this, at least in the Western side of gaming, that's where we're at. And then I think on the APAC side of gaming, it's a little different, varies by region, right? Like Japan is sort of in that same maturity phase because they have a long history, similar to the West. Korea's kind of in a weird middle ground where they have some PC experience, a lot of mobile experience. And I think they're trying to like figure out console. And then China, like coming from 100% mobile background, they're breaking more into cross-platform and PC console. So everyone's kind of at a different stage of life. And so like, where does this all converge and what does this mean as a Western marketer? I think is going to be really interesting because yeah, the competition is just at a different stage and they have different tools than, let's say, we did 10, 15 years ago. So yeah, I think evolving is the safe word to use. A little bit of uncertainty, but yeah, exciting.
I mean, I like unpredictable too, because I think that when you look at the space and you think about who are the competitors, right? You're seeing so much consolidation at the top. And then you're seeing indies come out of nowhere and have incredible success and then go away, or have incredible success and stick around. To your point, it doesn't, the ability to build a game has drastically come down, which makes a lot more competition. We said 19,000 games launched last year, but 15,000 of them not being played is a reality. And so where I'm interested to see is a lot of gaming in the early 2020s was predictable, right? You had the big game studios, the middle game studios, they all launched decent games, they had decent player bases, and everything was kind of consistent. And now you're seeing wildly different results from wildly different areas. You're seeing the biggest games go big, crush, have huge audiences, do well, and you're seeing indies out of nowhere. And so I think what's always interesting for non-endemics is well, how do I interpret that? How do I know what games to partner with? What games to?
I was gonna say, if we can barely figure it out within gaming, what are not like? I don't know what non-endemics are supposed to do. I mean, I guess that's why they've really leaned into just partnerships with Fortnite, and call it a day. It is kind of the most consistent thing right now. But yeah, it's I think competition coming from everywhere and everybody in a different stage of maturity is like, that's what's setting up this kind of like, not instability again. I don't want to use such negative words, but it's like, who can predict?
Hey, we know who can predict. Liquid Advertising. Nikki DePaola, VP of Global Media, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right, everyone, this has been another episode of the Leaderboard Insights podcast here with Overwolf. I've been your host, Nathan Lindberg, head of U.S. Brand Partnerships, and we'll see you next time.